LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the August 26th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 9 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source tonight will again be HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. I'll have about 2.5 minutes from his monologue last Friday, which was on the big topic I'm covering, Trump's worst week, which was briefly covered on the Sunday morning news analysis shows, which were usually, all of them were devoted at least 50% to the death of Senator John McCain. And if you've been watching my show for 5 years, you'll have seen many, many clips of Senator John McCain. I'm not really going to cover his death so much as if you want to see what I thought of John McCain when he was alive, you can just go and go to my LiberalViewer channel page and search the word McCain. And these are the top 3 videos that come up, but you get like over 100 videos. That one on top was like the week before he lost to Barack Obama there, when Tina Fey playing Sarah Palin pwned John McCain. That was about a week before he lost that election. Anyway, if you want to see more about John McCain, that's over on my channel. I will have my favorite John McCain clip that I'll show at the end, right before the bonus Dash and Sandy clip. But if you follow me on my Facebook page, facebook.com/LiberalViewer, I actually already uploaded that to Facebook earlier today, so you've already seen it if you're one of my Facebook followers. So keep that in mind. The big topic I'm covering, like I said, is Trump's worst week, the Paul Manafort verdict, Michael Cohen's guilty plea, where he actually stated under oath that Trump directed him to commit federal felonies, and of course the David Pecker, who's the guy who is the corporate head of the National Enquirer, and Allen Weisselberg, who's Donald Trump, the Trump Corporation's money guy. They both took immunity deals. So this was a really, really bad week for Donald Trump. I put Trump's worst week. I've actually only used that title once before. It was almost exactly a year ago. It was August 20th, 2017. It was like the week after Charlottesville. That was Trump's worst week before. Well, this is the worst week for his presidency in terms of criminal liability and in terms of impeachment. And I will have several clips on the possibility of impeachment at the end. And but before I get to all that, and the brief news summaries that I got, I did promise the Bill Maher monologue clip where he talks about Paul Manafort, he talks about Michael Cohen, and he actually, what happened on Tuesday, and you'll see this replayed like on the ABC This Week brief news summary where they show the breaking news on Tuesday. You'll see Bill Maher here says it's not Black Friday, it was Orange Tuesday. That's why I'm actually wearing a new shirt that has some orange in it in honor of Tuesday being Orange Tuesday. And I'll discuss all that with you after I watch this Bill Maher monologue clip with you here.
You can stop clapping. I have no money for you. But I know why you're happy today. I'm happy for the same reason. Because the courts of law, where real shit happens, have finally confirmed what a lot of us have been thinking for a long time. I'm not crazy. The president is an actual treasonous crook. And that's kind of a big thing. Oh, yes. You've heard of Black Friday? This week we had Orange Tuesday. They are rolling up the members of the Trump crime family. Manafort, guilty. Cohen pled guilty, currently singing. Allen Weisselberg, chief financial officer for the Trump Organization, singing. We heard Don McGahn, the White House counsel, is singing. Even Trump's old friend who buried all his shit in the National Enquirer, David Pecker. Even Pecker is not standing firm. Oh, I love this David Pecker guy. Apparently, there is so much dirt on Donald Trump. David Pecker kept a safe. They had a fucking vault. at the National Enquirer with all his shit in it. That's how it took to keep all his... And somebody figured out the combination to the safe. It's the first 4 numbers of Trump's weight. But these convictions this week, this isn't even the main course, which is Russia. This was just the Stormy Daniels appetizer. Look, the campaign manager, guilty. The personal attorney, guilty. The deputy campaign manager, guilty. The national security advisor. Cabinet meetings are now going to be held on visiting day at Leavenworth. And, you know, funny, I say all of Trump's lickspittle apologists on TV, they're like, oh, now just being friends with Donald Trump makes you a criminal. Apparently. Yes, apparently that is the case. By the way, one sign you might be a crook, your lawyer is going to jail. That's a little hint.
I like that last joke as a, technically as a lawyer, former criminal defense attorney. The sign, you might be a crook, that your lawyer is going to jail. That's, you might be a redneck if, or no, but... You might be a redneck if you voted for someone whose lawyer is going to jail. No, that's a whole different line of jokes. But the other joke in there that I didn't really care for, if I have to give my media criticism, there was the Pecker joke that Pecker wasn't standing firm. And I think Bill Maher can do better than that, because there were so many jokes like that with the whole David Pecker story this week. On the mainstream media, there was even like a chyron on MSNBC, like Trump worried Pecker may leak or something like that. So way too many Pecker jokes already this week. And so that was the political comedy that I start the show with. And as you may have noticed down in the video description, I have a link to the entire HBO real-time monologue. There's also a link down there to my clip list where you can see the 9 clips I'm going to be showing you in my notes on the clips. The rest of the clips now are coming from the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. Although, actually, I don't have anything from CBS's Face of the Nation. It was like wall-to-wall John McCain. One of the things I forgot to mention is for both Face of the Nation and Meet the Press, John McCain was their most frequent guest. I think it was like 112, 113 times John McCain was on Face of the Nation. It was like 80, 90 times that he was on Meet the Press. So that's why they really focused on John McCain, because he was like a darling of these shows. Like I said, you can go back and you can look at all the times he's been on my Sunday Live Clip Roundup. You can look at all the times that I've made videos with clips of John McCain. He's been like a staple of the corporate news media, and over the years I've said a lot of things about John McCain. But now I want to get to the big stories of the week, which I'm glad I actually already covered. The the Orange Tuesday story, especially the Michael Cohen implicating Donald Trump. I did a special live stream on Thursday. There's a link to that down in the video description. It's about 40 minutes long. I go into great depth about why it is that what Michael Cohen did actually is a felony, and why if what Michael Cohen said in his plea is true, that's also a felony for Donald Trump. And I'll talk about that a little more when I get to the Dershowitz clip, Alan Dershowitz. But before I get to the newsmaker clips, I want to show you several of the news summaries. Like I said, they're all very brief, starting with NBC's Meet the Press. Basically, they all started with a long, history look back at John McCain. Although none of them, not even Fox News, when they did their look back at John McCain, they didn't show the clip I'm going to show you at the end about torture, even though it comes from Fox News Sunday. But after the news, like the first half hour being spent on John McCain, here is the 27-second news summary of, actually, I had already decided to call the video this week Trump's Worst Week, but that is what Todd also argues in this 27-second clip from NBC's Meet the Press this morning over here.
Welcome back. It is fair to say this was the worst week yet in Donald Trump's presidency. On Tuesday, we were treated to a remarkable split-screen drama. One Trump confidant, lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to 8 counts of financial fraud. Moments later, and 230 miles to the south in suburban Washington, another Trump ally, Paul Manafort, was found guilty on 8 counts of financial crimes of his own. The twin events dominated news coverage and have many asking whether this is a turning point in the Trump presidency. Joining me now is Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, who
and actually, I don't have any Jeff Flake clips, although he was on a couple of the shows. He's an outgoing senator from Arizona. He was, he's had a lot to say about John McCain, but I won't have any Jeff Flake clips. I will have one more clip from NBC's Meet the Press later. He had on Jerry Nadler, who is the member of Congress from New York, who is the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. So if the Democrats take over the House, he will be the one in charge of hearings on impeachment if it comes to that. And he talks about that in a 5-minute clip. That's actually the last clip I have before my John McCain clip and the bonus Dash and Sandy clip. So wait for that. But the next clip I want to show you is the 90-second news summary. And this is the one I promised before I showed the Bill Maher clip. I mentioned that George Stephanopoulos in the ABC This Week clip he was actually going to show you clips from Orange Tuesday, and for some reason you saw in the NBC Meet the Press clip they were fixated on how far apart the Manafort and the Michael Cohen courts were between Virginia and New York at 200 miles according to ABC, where they also fixated on the distance between the two courts. Back on Orange Tuesday here, I think ABC, this is a minute longer than the NBC News summary that you saw there. And so they give you a little more detail on some of the pending scandals for the Trump administration over here.
Good afternoon. We are coming on the air again in a day of bombshell developments in the legal situation facing President Trump and his presidential campaign. Word just in that his former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, has been found guilty on 8 counts of tax evasion and bank fraud. We are coming on the air again because Michael Cohen, President Trump's former attorney, has just left the courthouse in the Southern District of New York in Lower Manhattan after pleading guilty to charges of tax evasion, bank fraud, and most significantly, campaign finance violations. That was the scene Tuesday. Twin legal blockbusters in courthouses 200 miles apart. The president's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, will now face a second trial in September. His former lawyer, Michael Cohen, now offering to cooperate with other investigations, and his guilty plea bolstered by cooperation from one of Trump's closest allies, David Pecker of the National Enquirer, and the man who knows more than anyone else about Trump's finances, his longtime CFO, Allen Weisselberg. Both men got immunity deals from prosecutors. And the Southern District's investigation into campaign finance felonies will continue, just one of several legal actions now confronting President Trump. The New York Attorney General has filed suit against the Trump Foundation, which could lead to a criminal referral. The Manhattan District Attorney also considering charges against the Trump Organization. Trump facing lawsuits in Maryland and D.C. over the Constitution's Emoluments Clause. And, of course, Special Counsel Robert Mueller investigating possible collusion with Russia and obstruction of justice. The big question going forward, will any of these investigations lay the groundwork for impeachment proceedings in Congress?
And like I said, I will have a clip on that. This is from ABC's This Week, where George Stephanopoulos talks to Alan Dershowitz and about the possibility of impeachment. And I will also talk about Alan Dershowitz's book, The Case Against Impeachment. But if you want to know about whether Donald Trump committed a felony or whether he's implicated in a felony, like I said, down in the video description, I have a link to the special live stream I did on Thursday, Is Trump a Felon?, where I went very deeply into the campaign finance law that shows that if what Michael Cohen said is true, Donald Trump did commit 2 felonies. And like I said, I thought the ABC This Week coverage there showed a lot of the pending scandals for Trump very well. And as you might imagine, the news summary from Fox News Sunday was not quite as extensive. This is only 39 seconds long. I guess it's longer than NBC's Meet the Press. But one of the things, this is Sandra Smith, was in for Chris Wallace this week. And if you watched my live stream from last Thursday that I just talked about, Sandra Smith is the person who interviewed both Alan Dershowitz and Lanny Davis. and she was like totally biased towards Trump in those interviews. And she was also in the interview. I'm going to show a clip of her interviewing Corey Lewandowski later, where her follow-ups are just ridiculous. Total softball interview, pro-Trump interview. And if you watch this 39-second news summary that she gives, though I'm sure she didn't actually write this, it's written by the producers or other people, but this 39-second news summary, instead of saying that Michael Cohen pled guilty and under oath said that Donald Trump committed federal felonies, they just say implicated in a hush money scheme, and it's their campaign finance felonies. I'll talk about that a little later, but that's my big criticism of the 39-second Fox News Sunday news summary over here.
Tensions between President Trump, his attorney general, and the Justice Department reaching epic levels after a week of legal bombshells involving once loyal members of his inner circle. Let's review this week. Mr. Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, convicted in federal court on financial crimes. His former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, implicated the president in a hush money scheme. And the two men closest to those payments granted immunity. The White House says none of this has anything to do with the president, that he did nothing wrong, and there are no charges against him. Joining us now, Alberto Gonzalez, former...
And I won't have clips of Alberto Gonzalez, but I will have a clip of Corey Lewandowski next. But you saw, there are no charges against Trump. That's like this weird logical loop that you heard also from Sarah Huckabee Sanders if you're watching the press briefings this week, that first, there's this belief that the sitting president can't be indicted, meaning they can't bring charges, at least federally, against it. Well, you can't bring charges against a sitting president. That's kind of up in the air constitutionally. If you read your U.S. Constitution, it doesn't say in there anywhere whether the president can be indicted or not. Supreme Court's never ruled on it. Apparently, the Justice Department and the Office of Legal Counsel for the President have written memos over the years saying they don't think the president can be indicted, but so whether they can bring charges against him. But as long as, so they say the president can't be indicted, you can't bring charges against him, and then we know there's no problem because there are no charges brought against him, which is what you heard Sandra Smith parrot from the Trump administration. Like I said, she's like a total parrot of the Trump administration, and you can see the same thing if you watch the way she interviewed Lanny Davis and Alan Dershowitz down at the Is Trump a Felon live stream I did on Thursday, that linked down in the video description. But the next clip I want to show is actually her incredible softball interview of Corey Lewandowski, where she lets him get away with saying, well, the Manafort trial was all stuff Paul Manafort did years ago, which is kind of true, even though he was also campaign manager for Donald Trump. And one thing Corey Lewandowski doesn't mention is the next trial in the District of Columbia is going to be the Paul Manafort's second trial. Actually has more to do with stuff he did much later. But then the real bogus part of Sandra Smith's questioning and follow-up questioning of Corey Lewandowski is he says what Michael Cohen did mostly had to do with, his business and not paying his taxes, mostly had to do with that. Never mentions the two campaign finance felonies where Michael Cohen specifically said, well, I'm actually going to show you his allocution on those two counts. I can't help myself. These are screenshots left over from my live stream on Thursday. Here's the count 7 allocution. Michael Cohen says, as to count 7, on or about the summer of 2016, in coordination with and at the direction of a candidate for federal office, I and the CEO of a media corporation, that's David Pecker of the National Enquirer, at the request of the candidate Donald Trump, worked together to keep an individual with information that would be harmful to the candidate, that's Karen McDougal's 10-month affair story, and to the harmful to the candidate in the campaign from publicly disclosing this information. After a number of discussions, we eventually accomplished the goal by the media company entering into a so this is Donald Trump directing Michael Cohen to commit count 7, and then his allocution, this is the transcript of his guilty plea. As to count 8, he also says that he was directed by the same candidate to make the payment to Stormy Daniels. So that is what Michael Cohen said, that these are federal felonies, campaign finance felonies, and Michael Cohen said in his guilty plea that Donald Trump directed him to do that. And by the way, under 18 U.S. Code Section 2, which is cited in the charging documents from Michael Cohen, it says whoever commits an offense against the United States or aids, abets, counsels, commands, or induces or procures its commission is punishable just like they did it themselves. So that means Donald Trump is guilty of federal felonies, but this is what Sandra Smith lets Corey Lewandowski get away with saying about what happened this week on Fox News Sunday this morning over here.
What a week this was. How would you describe this week for the president?
Well, Sandra, let me first echo what Judge Gonzalez said and let all of the viewers know how our thoughts and prayers are with the McCain family. And as a New Hampshire, almost native son, the years he spent up here campaigning, the success he had, I just want to echo those statements to remember a man who served our country with great admiration and honorable. And so I want to thank the McCain family and have our thoughts and prayers with him as we start. But as it relates to the president and this week, what we have seen here, once again, is the Mueller investigation, which was designed to look at potential collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian outside influence, has no bearing, has not produced any evidence, not one scintilla of evidence, that there was any type of collusion, cooperation, or coordination between the Trump campaign and anybody from an outside source to impact the outcome of the election. So what I think is important now is that the Mueller investigative team finishes their investigation, reports that to the Department of Justice, and we put an end to this investigation, which clearly has demonstrated has nothing to do with the presidential campaign of 2016.
You got to think about how that looks, though. The conviction of Paul Manafort, the guilty plea from Michael Cohen, immunities granted to two others close to all of this. And you've got to wonder, Corey, and the optics of it, does it spell trouble for the president as this investigation continues?
Well, Sandra, if you look at what Paul Manafort was originally charged with and has now been found guilty of, those are crimes that he was accused of and found guilty of that took place 10 to 12 years prior to him coming to the Trump campaign for the 5-month window. Those were tax evasion charges. Those are charges that have absolutely nothing to do with his tenure with us. And what Bob Mueller's team was supposed to be investigating was the potential collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. So the conviction of Paul Manafort has nothing to do with the Trump campaign, the Trump organization, or any work that transpired during the 2016 campaign. And as it relates to Michael Cohen, who has now pled guilty and was looking at 60-plus years in jail, once again, his crimes were basically crimes of not following the rules as it relates to your taxes, filing false bank statements. Those have nothing to do with the campaign. Look, I was a campaign manager. I spent as little time with Michael Cohen as humanly possible. He was never part of the campaign when I was there. And what he has now pled guilty to, by and large, has nothing to do with the campaign or the Trump organization. This is Michael Cohen not filing taxes.
I hear what you're saying about your relationship with him, and there have been reports that you privately tried to get the president, to back away from him. You were warning him that he was a loose cannon. But the president said at that time, at one point in time, that he was a good lawyer and he trusted him for a long time. Now he's calling him a flipper. So why did the president trust Michael Cohen as long as he did, especially with warnings coming from the likes of you?
You know, Michael was very good at certain things, and one of the things that he was very good at, and we've now seen it, is intimidating people and pushing himself to fix. He was the self-described fixer, which I don't know what that means, but I know from the corporate side, and I didn't work at the corporation to be clear, but when there was a problem from the corporation side, you know, if there's a problem with an airplane engine, Michael was tasked with the negotiation to make sure that that engine was fixed under the warranty procedures when companies didn't want to do that. I know that was one specific project, but I can tell you this, I didn't like to work with Michael. I didn't like to interact with Michael, and that's why he had no role in the campaign. Even though he wanted one, I was very clear when I was in charge of the campaign, Michael was not somebody who we wanted at the campaign. He would go out and make statements that we had to walk back afterwards because he would say things which were factually untrue, and I warned everybody at the organization that Michael was going to become a problem.
Here we are, final weekend in August, I should say. It's hard to believe we'll be moving into September, ever more closer to November. What are your expectations for Republicans in the midterm elections, Corey?
So I kept it playing there till Sandra Smith's follow-up so you could see what I said before I showed the clip, is that it was a total softball question. What do you think about what happened this week? And she said, she talked about the optics and why did Donald Trump trust Michael Cohen for so long, but never really cross-examined Corey Lewandowski there about his whole thing about Michael Cohen. All he did was everything he pled to had nothing to do with the campaign. It was mostly just his own problems, and forgetting the 2 federal campaign finance violations in which he specifically said under oath that Donald Trump directed him to commit those 2 federal felonies. And as I showed you before, if you direct someone to commit a federal felony, that is as if you committed it yourself. And if you really want a more in-depth look at that, you can, like I said multiple times before, watch my live stream from Thursday about is Trump a felon? And one of the 3 clips I showed in that live stream was the Alan Dershowitz clip, where he was really poorly cross-examined there by Sandra Smith, although Lanny Davis was also poorly cross-examined by Sandra Smith. I don't know what her deal is, but one of the things I said about Alan Dershowitz when after I showed his clip on Thursday was that I might get his book and do a book review of his book, The Case Against Impeachment. And because every time he appears on any of these shows, they show his book and say, he's the author of The Case Against Impeachment. And I already thought it was some marketing ploy by Alan Dershowitz. But even so, I bought the book. I've got it here. Here we've got The Case Against Impeachment. And you're about to see George Stephanopoulos also pimp the book right before he asks a series of questions to Alan Dershowitz about whether Trump should feel like he's in trouble. And I'm going to refute most of what he says, although I kind of already did last Thursday. But the one thing about this book I have to let you know, after I bought the book, I found out it really supported my feeling that it was a big marketing ploy. And by that, I mean the chances of Trump getting impeached are pretty much the same as the chances of the Democrats retaking control of the House of Representatives. Because, if you read your Constitution, it only takes a majority vote from the House of Representatives to impeach a president. Then to remove him takes 2/3 of the Senate. That's 67 senators. It's never happened. That's much harder. But impeachment, basically the same odds of the Democrats taking control of the House in the November election, in my opinion. So impeachment is really likely. So having a book out there called The Case Against Impeaching Trump, that is a really good marketing ploy already. I've been holding it up all this time. But one thing I want to point out to you after I bought it that I found out that made me really think it's a marketing ploy is it's a really tiny book. Look at this. It's 100 pages. When they keep showing it like this, it looks like it's a real book, that all these other books behind me, but it's a really tiny book. I think it's a scam, but you're going to see George Stephanopoulos pimp the book here, and then I edited together several of Alan Dershowitz's statements that I will somewhat refute, but if you really want them refuted, go watch my Thursday live stream, Is Trump a Felon? Because I kind of already refuted these. But here's the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos interview with Alan Dershowitz. Representative Eric Swalwell was also in this interview, but I cut out all his parts and kept almost all the Dershowitz parts, which I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz, author of the book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. And Professor Dershowitz, you wrote the book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. That was, of course, before this week's developments. Does what you saw in the Michael Cohen case and that guilty plea, does it weaken your case?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything the Congressman said. I think it would be great to have the Democrats in control of one branch and being able to conduct investigations. I think we have to get to the bottom of this. Look, I fully understand why so many people hope that President Trump has committed crimes and impeachable offenses, but the evidence isn't there. The president or a candidate is entitled to contribute anything he wants to his own campaign. So the only issue here is whether or not there was a failure failure to report the contribution. That failure to report is attributable to the treasurer of the campaign, not to the president.
Well, can I just stop you there?
Conspiracy is a very big stretch.
Well, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to get to. I mean, on the one hand, it could be a reporting violation and a deliberate run around the laws and run around the laws in working with another person, conspiracy. That would be a serious crime, wouldn't it?
It's a stretch. It's a stretch. Look, the reporting, if it occurred, would have occurred after the election, considering the chronology of everything. And so to stretch and make a reporting violation, which so many campaigns have, President Obama's campaign had to pay $300,000 for reporting violations, to make a conspiracy out of that when the law itself says the treasurer is responsible, not the candidate, is an example of precisely what we're seeing, trying to stretch the law to fit somebody who many Americans hope and want to see commit a crime or commit an impeachable offense. I agree with the congressman. Let's wait to see what the evidence is. Look, the other thing that I think last week proves is that the special counsel is the least important element in this investigation.
I want to get to that I do want to get to that as well. But first, you were just about to say, Professor Dershowitz, you know, that perhaps the special counsel is the least of the threats the president faces right now. You've got the Southern District, you've got the New York Attorney General, you've got the Manhattan District Attorney. Where's the greatest threat?
Well, I've said that right from the beginning, because I think he has constitutional defenses to the investigation being conducted by Mueller. But there are no constitutional defenses to what the Southern District is investigating. So I think the Southern District is the greatest threat. Look, it would be good for the American public if President Trump sat down and said everything he knows, but it wouldn't be good for President Trump. And that's why his lawyers are so strongly recommending against it. His lawyers, particularly his private lawyers, are not supposed to consider what's best for America. The White House counsel, perhaps, yes, but his private lawyers are supposed to consider what's best for Mr. Trump. And it certainly is not best for Mr. Trump to sit down and allow himself to answer questions, even truthfully, that might be contradicted by Cohen or McCain or somebody else, because that's a perjury trap.
6 tweets and an interview against Attorney General Sessions this week. What would happen if the president fired the Attorney General?
Well, he's perfectly entitled to do so. You know, President Clinton did not have a good relationship with his Attorney General, especially when she essentially appointed special counsel. But he kind of didn't do anything about it. He complained, he grumbled in private, but he didn't fire. I think it would be a mistake to fire anybody. Look, my advice to the president, I never gave it to him privately because I'm not his lawyer, but on television, is don't fire, don't pardon, don't tweet, and don't testify. And if he listened to those 4 things, he'd be in less trouble than he is today. But again, my job is to protect civil liberties of all Americans. I'm not here to protect or defend the particular president, but I worry about stretching the law and the implications it could have for the future.
I don't know, is Alan Dershowitz really still out there protecting civil liberties? That's what made him, like, if you watch my live stream from Thursday, I talked about how Dershowitz was one of my heroes back in the day, and one of the reasons I went to law school, because he was such an advocate for civil liberties and a criminal defense attorney that, you know, upheld the Bill of Rights, zealous defense of counsel, and all the, you know, the important, if you look at your Constitution, you read your Bill of Rights, like the 5th Amendment, the 6th Amendment, the 8th Amendment, the 4th Amendment, those are all like upheld daily by criminal defense attorneys and public defenders out all across the nation. And so that's why he was kind of one of my heroes back in the day. But since he moved way to the right on topics like Israel and now the Donald Trump impeachment, I've been wondering what happened to Alan Dershowitz. And he, in that argument, he like replayed some of the arguments I've already refuted. Like I said, down in the video description, you can see my Thursday live stream where I talked about why Trump is implicated in a felony, despite all the things Donald Trump that Alan Dershowitz said there. I point out that if you look at, you know, he talked about that Donald Trump can give as much money as he wants to his own campaign, but that's not what's alleged in Michael Cohen's pleas to count 7 and count 8, the campaign finance felonies. What those counts say is that the National Enquirer paid a bunch of money to Karen McDougal and Michael Cohen paid a bunch of money to Stormy Daniels, and those were loans to the campaign because they helped the campaign. They were for the purpose of helping the campaign. And if you loan something to a campaign, well, this is 52 U.S. Code Section 30,101. A contribution to a campaign includes, includes a loan. Why doesn't Alan Dershowitz know that? I don't know why Alan Dershowitz doesn't know that, but that is one thing that I would say about Alan Dershowitz's analysis there, and the rest of it's in my Thursday live stream. And then he also used the term perjury trap, and if you look down in the video description, I put a link to my video from the Saturday before last, like 8 days ago. Trump perjury trap claim is bogus, and it's actually gotten quite a few views in the last week. It's I think around 12,000 views at this point. That's like the most views I've gotten since the end of the Saturday Night Live season last spring. So if you want to know why the perjury trap argument that Alan Dershowitz made is bogus, you can watch that 9-minute video that includes some clips from a Seth Meyers closer look video. That anyway, I want to move on from Alan Dershowitz now to the last two clips I have that are news clips before my favorite John McCain clip and the bonus Sandy and Dash clip. The first one, so these are two Democrats to make up for Corey Lewandowski and Alan Dershowitz defending the president. Now I'm going to show you the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, who will be the chair of the House Intelligence Committee if the Democrats take over the House in the November election, which is most likely. And then, like I said, the next news clip will be Jerry Nadler of New York, who will take over the House Judiciary Committee and be in charge of impeachment if the Democrats take over the House. And they're both talking about impeachment and about Trump's worst week, and especially Adam Schiff talking about what happened on Orange Tuesday, although the phrase Orange Tuesday does not appear in this clip, but it's this is Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union talking to Adam Schiff. They did like 2 hours of State of the Union, and I watched the whole 2 hours. It was almost all about John McCain, but then I found this one Adam Schiff clip talking about what's really going to be the big news of this week, Trump getting accused of a crime and what it means for impeachment. Adam Schiff from the Intelligence Committee talking about it with Jake Tapper over here.
That if he were here, he would be telling me, don't only talk about me with Adam Schiff. A lot happened in the news this week, and you need to talk about it. He believed intensely in the oversight responsibilities of the Congress when it came to the executive branch, even if many of his Republican colleagues have forgotten about that obligation. So let me ask you, in that vein, the president's former personal lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, said this week under oath that President Trump, when he was a candidate, directed him to violate federal election laws. What's your take on that?
Well, this is pretty serious business. I mean, this is the first witness who, under oath, has basically said during a guilty plea that he was part of a criminal conspiracy with the President of the United States. And these were no inconsequential bookkeeping campaign finance errors. It wasn't like they inadvertently made a contribution slightly in excess of the limit. This was a planned out solicitation, essentially, of a corporate contribution or a payment well in excess, hundreds of thousands of dollars of the limits. And in an area that could very well have been decisive in the election, that is to keep from the public information that allegations that the president had an affair with a porn star, for example, to keep that from the public weeks before the election. That could have been determinative in such a close race. So it's serious business. I think we're going to have to look at that evidence in its totality as we learn more and we get a report ultimately from Bob Mueller about what the consequences of all that are.
So you have argued in the New York Times opinion piece in May that impeachment of President Trump will be more difficult politically if it seems like Democrats were hoping to impeach President Trump all along. It seems pretty clear that a lot of Democrats believe that there are now grounds for impeachment based on this Michael Cohen plea agreement in which he admits to committing felonies, and 2 of them he says he did in coordination with and at the direction of then candidate Trump. But it also seems as though Democrats don't want to talk about impeachment because it might hurt your ability to win back the House in November.
Well, it's not just, I think, that Democrats don't want to talk about impeachment. I think as a matter of our constitutional responsibility, we have to look candidly at what is the evidence and what does that mean and what does that say in terms of whether we've reached the point of high crimes and misdemeanors. But I don't think we should be talking about it and embracing it before we've seen the full body of evidence. As a former prosecutor, I like to know all the facts before I make a judgment. And the reality is impeachment is a political standard. Impeachment is, at any given time, what half of the House and 2/3 of the Senate say it is. And given the dearth of people in the GOP who are willing to say anything about this president's conduct, I think you're going to need a really powerful case to entertain that kind of a sanction. Jake, I mean, look what happened after the president started attacking his own attorney general for not getting rid of Bob Mueller and persecuting his political rivals. You had 2 prominent GOP senators say, well, if he wants to get rid of the AG, we'll help him get a new one, but let's wait until after the midterms. That is not something you would have ever heard John McCain say. I was proud to see Ben Sasse take issue with that. That was very John McCain-like. We need people like John McCain now more than ever.
I want to ask you about your part.
So yeah, that clip ended with Jake Tapper saying, John McCain would want me to ask you these questions. And so it started with that, and then Adam Schiff at the end saying, we need more John McCain. So there was even some John McCain content in those Trump scandal questions from Jake Tapper to Adam Schiff. But you heard Adam Schiff say, well, we have to wait for all the evidence before we decide anything on impeachment. And some other people in, some of the other pundits talked about how Democrats don't want to talk about impeachment because that's the one thing that might energize Trump's base and get them to come out and vote in November. And we just want the Democrats to be energized. We're going to wait till after the election to start talking about impeachment. But like I said earlier, I personally believe that the chance of Trump getting impeached, that's not removed. Remember, like Adam Schiff said there, it's half of the House to impeach, but then 2/3 of the Senate to remove. But to impeach, I think if Democrats take the House based on what's already in public purview, there will be impeachment. There's first the Michael Cohen plea that was accepted by the prosecutor, which means they probably have more evidence than just the word of Michael Cohen, which isn't worth that much since he is not the most honest person. So they probably have additional corroborating evidence to support what Michael Cohen says about being directed by the president to commit felonies. Well, that's at least worth impeachment hearings. And then there's the whole Trump Tower meeting that I've talked about so many times in the past, where Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner, the Kremlin lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, and other Russians to be named later all met and talked about dirt on Hillary Clinton. That's basically at least the beginnings of the collusion investigation, and then I'm not even going to get into obstruction of justice. So there's so much basis for impeachment already. I don't know why. Well, I mean, I do know why Adam Schiff is being so wait and see. Let's wait for the Mueller report, and it's because it's the political reason. But at least he said it takes half the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate to impeach and remove the president. I saw multiple pundits on other shows and clips I'm not going to show you say it only takes 60 senators, which is the filibuster level, but 60 senators to remove the president. No, it's 67, and that would take a lot of evidence, strong evidence, bipartisan evidence. And actually that's something that Jerry Nadler from New York, who is the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, talks about in this final news clip. before my favorite John McCain clip and the bonus Sandy and Dash clip. Well, this is Jerry Nadler talking for 5 minutes with Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press about what he's going to be looking for in terms of impeachment if he is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee after the Democrats retake the House in the November election. And you'll hear some of the wait-and-see, very conservative language you heard from Adam Schiff in the last clip, from Jerry Nadler in this clip, which I will discuss with you after we watch. This is 5 minutes and 1 second from NBC's Meet the Press this morning, which we will watch together over here.
After Michael Cohen essentially said the President of the United States was a co-conspirator with him in directing him to a federal crime, should that trigger the start of an investigation in the Judiciary Committee that could end up going to impeachment or not, but the way our system works, is this the proper way it should begin?
Well, I think the Mueller investigation has to continue first and foremost, and the committee has to defend the Mueller investigation against the president's and the Republicans in Congress attempts to sabotage it, to discredit it, and to discredit the FBI and the Department of Justice. Congress is supposed to be a check and balance on the executive. We're supposed to guarantee accountability. Under the Republicans, it's been exactly the opposite. Chairman Nunes of the Intelligence Committee was caught on tape at a Republican fundraiser recently saying that he viewed his major role as protecting the president. The role of Congress is not to protect the president, it's to hold the president and any president accountable to the American people. And we ought to be holding investigations.
What would that look like today? Let's say you had a functional relationship with the other side. Okay, we know right now that's tough inside the House. But if you did, what would that look like? You and Congressman Goodlatte would be doing what?
Well, first of all, I hope we would confer with Mueller to see what we shouldn't do that would get in the way of his investigation. We don't want to step on, interfere with them by accident. But following that, we should be investigating all of these things: the possible interference of the Russians in our investigations, what we can do to make sure that that can't happen again, who in the United States aided and abetted that, if anybody, other crimes that may have been, not just crimes, but other improper acts in terms of the campaign. We should be investigating all of those things and bringing them to light for the American people, and possibly seeing if there's any legislation we should do to prevent their recurrence in the future. But again, we should talk to the Mueller people first to make sure we don't step on their investigation.
Let me ask you this. You know, you were one of Bill Clinton's most ardent defenders during his impeachment. You called it at the time a partisan coup d'etat. If you were charged with running something that, some form of an impeachment investigation, if you're chairman of the Judiciary Committee, which what would happen if Democrats took over Congress, how would you make sure that somehow you handled this differently than your Republican colleagues did 20 years ago?
I would take the same attitude I took then. I said then that impeachment is a constitutional provision to protect the Constitution against the president who would aggrandize power, who would ride roughshod over checks and balances, who pose a true threat to American liberty or to constitutional government and the rule of law. And I said also at the time, and therefore you should only do it under those circumstances. I also said at the time that you should not do an impeachment on a partisan basis. That in order to do an impeachment properly, you'd have to think that the evidence of threatening impeachable offenses, threatening to the constitutional order, threatening to liberty, were so overwhelming that by the end of the process, the overwhelming majority of the American people, including a lot of the people who supported the other side, would agree that you had to do it. And we certainly didn't have that then.
Obviously, Watergate did eventually have that.
Yes.
Let me ask you this final question here. Back in 1999, during the debate about whether or not President Clinton obstructed justice, you said at the time you weren't convinced that a president could obstruct justice. Do you still feel that way? That it's not one of, I think the quote, that might not be impeachable. Put it this way, that obstruction of justice might not be an impeachable offense.
Well, I don't remember saying that, but if I said it, I said it. But no, I don't agree with that today. A president, anybody can obstruct justice. An obstruction of justice under certain circumstances might be an impeachable offense. Remember, there's a very big difference between a crime which may or may not be impeachable, and an impeachable offense, which doesn't have to be a crime. An impeachable offense...
So wait, there's some crimes that the president could commit that you would think is not impeachable?
Yes.
Like,
absolutely.
What, the affairs?
Well,
these campaign finance, this wouldn't, to you, rise to impeachable?
That might, because it implicates subverting the election process.
But you're skeptical, it sounds like.
I don't know. I haven't studied that. But certainly, I said at the time that perjury with regard to a private sexual affair did not threaten the constitutional order, is a crime, but was not an impeachable offense. Perjury regarding an attempt by a president to subvert the constitutional order to aggrandise power probably would be an impeachable offense.
All right. Gerald Nadler, I have to leave it there. Ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, representing New York City. Thanks for coming on, sharing your views.
Thank you.
When we come back...
So, yeah, that I think is really important information. Jerry Nadler, the congressman from New York, telling you if he takes over the House Judiciary Committee, what he's going to look for when it comes to impeachment, and trying to square those views with what he said back in the 90s, 1999 or whatever, during the Clinton impeachment, which is something that I am also old enough to remember, which is why I'm really hoping I will be able to cover the impeachment next year, which seems at least more likely than not to be occurring in 2019. That there will be impeachment hearings and an impeachment. Like I said, that's just the House of Representatives bringing charges against Trump. Then it goes to the Senate, where they have to get 67 senators, and whether that happens or not, I don't know. That's what you find out in your Constitution. And by the way, I was looking at the live comments along the way, and all the Super Chat contributors, including someone who wanted to know about the Constitutions. Here's my Super Chat contributors so far. So I appreciate all those contributions, but Darnell H, usually I need a shipping address. So if you, Darnell H, before I finish the show, if you post in the live comments an email address where I can email you, and then you can email me back your shipping address, I will send you both this Constitution from it, and it has a Know Your Rights section because it's an ACLU Constitution, and also one of these #LiberalViewer stickers, which normally because YouTube got rid of the messaging system, so unless you put an email address in the live comments, I don't know exactly how I would contact you. Normally I send the Constitutions and the stickers either to the patrons on Patreon, there's a link to Patreon down in the video description, or to people who give me a direct contribution on PayPal of $10 or more. There's a link to PayPal down there, and when you give the PayPal contribution, you also can give a shipping address if you want to get the sticker and the Constitution. Super Chat, I haven't given out the Constitutions, but I'm happy to give one to Darnell H if Darnell H will post an email address in the live comments here. Or I don't know. Otherwise, I don't know where to ship it. So, I guess if you post an email address in the comments, other people will see it. But anyway, that's the only way I can think of to give a Constitution to someone who gives a Super Chat contribution, because usually I've been doing it just for the PayPal contributors and the Patreon contributors. And by the way, I appreciate all of you who support my videos in that way, and I'm about to finish up this Sunday live clip roundup, which I spent most of the day preparing, and what I spend most of every Sunday preparing. But before I finish up, I did promise 2 bonus clips. First, this is my favorite John McCain clip, which I will follow with my bonus Sandy and Dash clip, which I saw some of my Super Chat contributors wanted me to give some treats to Dash, and we're appreciating the Sandy and Dash clips, so I will finish with that. But first, this is my favorite John McCain clip from Fox News Sunday, April 2nd, 2007. I used it in multiple edited, produced videos I made really early in my YouTube career, including one criticizing Bill O'Reilly, saying something like, Bill O'Reilly, I don't know, something about Bill O'Reilly and torture. This is where I stripped this clip from this morning. But it's John McCain, even though I disagreed with many of his policies. And if you watch all the clips of his over the years I've shown on my Sunday live clip roundup, I've talked about his, he was much more pro-military intervention than I certainly would be, and many other policies, but at least on the subject of torture, and when it was important during the George W. Bush administration especially, he was vocal being opposed to torture, as you will see in the 1-minute 6-second Fox News Sunday clip, which is not very high resolution because it's so old, which I will briefly discuss with you after I watch it with you over here.
It's interesting to me that every retired military officer, whether it be Colin Powell or whether it be former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, everybody who's been in war doesn't want to torture people and think that it's the wrong thing to do. And history shows that. We cannot torture people and maintain our moral superiority in the world. And that's a fact.
But when George Tenet says...
I don't care what George Tenet says. I know what's right. I know what's morally right as far as America's behavior is concerned.
But if I may, sir, when George Tenet says we save lives through some of these techniques...
I don't accept it. I don't accept that fundamental thesis because it's never worked throughout history. And so, again, I know this for a fact, and anyone who's had experience with this, I think that's, the people I respect will tell you that if you inflict enough physical pain on someone, they will tell you anything they think you want to know in order to relieve that pain. That's just a fundamental fact. And we've gotten a huge amount of misinformation as well as other information from these techniques.
So I appreciate John McCain at least making it clear that torture doesn't work. It's immoral. Even if it did work, it would be immoral. But in addition to being immoral, it doesn't work because it gets as much misinformation as information. And I'm seeing from my live viewers and from my console here that something is going terribly wrong with the stream. So I will just finish up with my bonus Sandy and Dash clip that I promised. I don't know, am I going to have to upload the recorded version? We'll see what the live stream looks like when it turns into an archive. But anyway, like I said, here's Sandy and Dash this morning, but when they were both very hungry for breakfast, waiting at the door and then being let through the door for breakfast this morning over here. So that's the show. Thanks for joining me. I don't know why the stream messed up at the end. Hopefully this was getting out there, and if not, I'll worry about it later. Upload some sort of other recorded archive on my hard drive, but I should be back next week and for the foreseeable future, and until next week or until there's some other reason for me to do some special live stream or edited produced video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.